Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome back to Foundation Course 5 on how karma works. I almost said how yoga works, but we know it's very closely related if you've read that book. So, how karma works. Thank you, live translators, for coming back to assist us with this course. And thank you to the technical team for making it all work perfectly smoothly. We couldn't do this without any of you. We couldn't do this without anyone who's here, right? Okay, so bring to mind now your motivation for being here today. This is bringing this to mind will help make the karma that we create here together. I mean, we each individually create while we're together, uh, as powerful as it can be. So make your motivation as large as possible. Feel it as strongly as you can in your heart. And let's do the prayers. Sashi Puki Jukshin Meto Tram Mira Blingshin Yende Gempadi Sangye Shindu Mikde Uwaki Drokun Namdak Shingla Chuparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami Sangye Churan Soki Chuknam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chushe Ki Pesanam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Duparsho Sangye Churan Soki Chuknam La Changchu Partu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chushe Ki Pesanam Ki Drola Pinchir Sangye Duparsho Sangye Chiran Soki Chuknam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chushe Ki Pesanam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Duparsho. So last time, uh, I was only able, because of my long-windedness, I was only able to talk about like 3 of the questions in the homework. Um, so we talked about what text it is we're studying, right? Can someone tell me what text we're studying? We're studying the Abhidharma. specifically the Abhidharma Kosha that was written by Master Vasubandhu in around 350 current era. And we're using a commentary on the Abhidharma Kosha by the first Dalai Lama. And that's called Illumination of the Path to Freedom. Now, what does the word Abhidharma mean? It means knowledge. And the word abhi itself means up to or approaching. And dharma means an existing object, an object that holds its own nature. And this book is about the highest object, which would be, in this school, nirvana. So altogether, Abhidharma means knowledge, and then broken apart, it means the highest knowledge that brings us to nirvana. And then we also talked about that there are different ways we can think of the word knowledge, of what it means, right? That there's actual knowledge and accessories to knowledge. And some of those accessories are real accessories, and some of them are just nominal, in name only. So does anyone remember what actual knowledge is? Remember, we talked about the 5 paths of a student's spiritual journey from meeting the teachings to reaching the highest goal. Right. The actual knowledge are the last 3 paths. So the path of seeing, which is the first time we touch the diamond world, as Geshe Michael says. The first time we see selflessness directly. And then the path of habituation, which is getting used to what it was we saw. And then the path of no more learning. So today I am going to finish class 1 and do class 2. So we'll see how that goes. Put on your seatbelts. Oh, remember the accessories to knowledge. The real accessories to knowledge are the knowledge that we gain when we listen to, contemplate, and meditate on the teachings. And then the ones that are accessories in name only are things like our books. So you'll notice that the actual and the accessories are things that we're doing with our mind. They're affecting they are part of our state of being. They are paths, they are realizations or knowledge understandings about the teachings that we hold ourselves. Okay. So we're going to talk about the 8 chapters of the Abhidharma, and I'll just go through them quickly. And I'll show you the Tibetan so that you have it. Okay, good. Dengnangpo, that just means first chapter. The first chapter is Calm Tempa. It's Tempa means presentation, so you're going to see that in the name of every chapter. And calm, it can mean many different things, but here what it means is categories. So the first chapter is categories of existence, and it goes through like everything. So, for example, it talks about the 5, what we call the 5 heaps in the teachings, Pungpo, but actually it's just talking about body and mind, those 5 parts. There's the 12 doors of sense, and there are the 18 tatus or categories. The main thing here, or the basic category in this chapter, is the distinction between stained and unstained things. All objects in the universe are either stained or unstained. And stained means that they have to do with negative thoughts. They are produced by them, or they are producing them, or they themselves are negative thoughts. Those are the 3 basic kinds of stained things. So it is basically our samsara, our suffering. So it's things that are related to, things that are produced by, are producing, or are themselves related to negative thoughts. So it may be that we have never encountered anything that is unstained. That everything, that all objects that we've experienced, all emotions or thoughts, have been stained. I'm sorry, stained, right? Stained. And this is, we talked about, if you've taken course 1, you know that we talked about how everything is suffering. So this is related to that thought, and it's just driving home the point by categorizing all things in existence, by discussing every existing thing. So more specifically, that they are suffering. And we can, in later teachings, we can be, we can be taught that, like the Buddha, for example, appears as if we have the karma for this to happen, the Buddha can appear as a bridge if we need a way to cross a river. So would that bridge be a stained thing? So we just have to remember what school we're in. And we're in the detailist school. And this is the foundational school of all the philosophical schools. And so the main point that they're presenting is about suffering, that we are in a realm, we are in a cycle of being forced to take on this suffering body and mind over and over and over again, due to, we're going to get into this today, but due to things that we've thought and done and said in the past that have been harmful to ourselves or others. So that's the first chapter. The second chapter, Nyingpa, is called Wangpo Tenpa. So say Wangpo Tenpa. Wangpo means power. So this is a presentation of the powers. And basically, this is a more detailed description of our faculties of perception, our windows to the world, if you will, how it is that we experience what we experience. And these are called powers. This chapter also talks about mental functions. So it's basically Buddhist psychology. And then it also gets into a discussion of causes. There are different types of causes. Now, how does chapter 2 relate to chapter 1? So the first chapter is talking about all existing things and categorizing them basically into stained and unstained things. And then chapter 2 dives more deeply into one of those categories, which is how it is we experience our world, our doors of sense, our sense powers. The third chapter, Ne Sumpa, is Jikten Tempa. Say Jikten Tempa. This is a presentation of the perishable world. So Jikten, this word Jikten or Loka in Sanskrit, it means the world. And what this, it's not just like our planet, but it's also all the beings who are on the planet. And it's not just our planet, but it's like many different planets. So this is like a description of, they break it down into the world and its inhabitants. when they talk about the world, it's what are different realms in the world. Like there are hell realms, there are hungry ghost realms, there are deva realms, there's the desire realm, and then the inhabitants is who lives in this in or on this world. Um, what do they look like? How do they think? This chapter also talks about measurement. So it goes from subatomic particles up to zillions of light years. It talks about how planets are born, how they remain, and how they die. So this third chapter is a more detailed description of our suffering world. So it's not just our world again, our planet, but it's also our existence, our being, the type of being we are. Nishipa, the fourth chapter, is Le Tempa. C'est Le Tempa. And this is the presentation of karma, which is where we're going to spend most of our time. The reason that this chapter comes after the description of the suffering world is that, it's like now that we know that, everything is either stained or unstained. And how we experience our world is through these different sense powers, and our world and us, we are all suffering beings. The question comes from, like, where does that come from? Why is it that way? So this chapter gets into that discussion, and there are some wrong ideas that exist in the world, not only in Vasubandhu's time, but now, about why that is. And there are some correct ideas. And so Master Vasubandhu dispels wrong ideas and presents correct ideas. The fifth chapter, Nengapa, is Tragye Nyomong Tempa. Just a note you'll find in the course materials, like the answer key, for example, it forgets this very important part of the phrase, which is Nyomong. So say Tragye Nyomong Tempa. Right now, the answer key just says widespread, the presentation of the widespread. But what is it that's widespread? It's nyomo, mental afflictions. So so this talks about all the different ways that we can harm ourselves and others. all the different thoughts that harm ourselves and others. So why it comes after the chapter on karma is that these thoughts, these negative thoughts, inspire us to create karma. They're the motivating factor to creating karma. Nedrukpa, that means sixth chapter, is Kansak Danglang Tempa. Say Kansak Dang Lam Tempa. So Kansak, that means person, and Lam, that means path. So chapter 6 is a presentation of the person and the path. So, after you've gone through the previous 5 chapters and you've learned about all the categories of things and how it is we experience the world and what the world is and its inhabitants and now it's all suffering and what karma is, how it's created, and how mental afflictions are involved in that process, then the next thing you really are burning to know is how to get out. What is the path to get out of this suffering world? So the person here in this title is an advanced practitioner, a person who has developed wisdom. Nedunpa, the 7th chapter, it's called Geshe Denpa. Say Geshe Denpa. And Geshe means wisdom. So it's the presentation of wisdom. That's chapter 7. And it builds on the previous chapter by getting into more details about what wisdom is and these realizations that you have to get out of this cycle of suffering. Negyepa, which means the 8th chapter, is called Nyompar Jukpa Tempa. Say Nyompar Jukpa Tempa. Nyompar Jukpa Tempa. This chapter is called The Presentation of Balanced Meditation. Balanced meditation here, it is not a description of how to meditate, but it's talking about it's a description of the Buddha's knowledge, the Buddha's wisdom. And so it's a description of the highest knowledge that we will attain when we have studied and practiced and advanced through the steps of the path, those 3 steps that are actual knowledge, reaching up to of Buddha's full knowledge. So those are the the 8 chapters of the Abhidharmakosha. And a little description of the links between them. Basically, you can say that each chapter takes something from the previous chapter and builds on it. It either builds on it or it describes it in more detail. So that's how all those chapters relate. And then they also overall are like a progression from our current state as a suffering, as experiencing all these different kinds of suffering, up to balanced meditation, up to a Buddha's knowledge. The last part of class 1, it's mentioned in the reading, if you have already read it, but it's about the 4 attributes of a Buddhist book. So what 4 attributes does a book need to have in order to be considered a Buddhist book? There are 4 requirements. The first one is called zhi-ja. Say zhi-ja. Zhi-ja. And that means subject matter. So it should be talking about something that exists, like why Isaac Asimov's book I, Robot, back in the 1960s, which was a science fiction novel about robots that interact with humans, that wouldn't be a Buddhist book because the subject matter doesn't even exist. At least then it didn't exist. Now we have robots communicating with us. Maybe it's all his fault. Anyway, so there's a funny example of a book that doesn't have a subject matter, and it's a book about crow's teeth, because crows don't have teeth, so there's nothing for it to say. So a Buddhist book doesn't have to do with whether or not it's printed by a Buddhist printing company or written by someone who's a Buddhist monk or nun, or even if it just talks about, well, it must have a subject matter. There must be a subject matter. And in the Abhidharmakosha, the subject matter is stained and unstained things. What is related to negative emotions and what is pure. Until we reach nirvana, mostly everything we experience coming into contact with is stained. Then the second requirement for a Buddhist book is gupa. This is not the gupa we had in meditation. This is gupa. Say gupa. And this means purpose. So a book has to have a subject matter and it has to have a purpose. And what is the purpose of the Treasure House of Higher Knowledge, the Abhidharmakosha? The purpose is to plant seeds for wisdom. Then the third part, subject matter purpose, third part is ultimate goal or nyingge. Nyingge. Sometimes you see it spelled like this, nyingge, and I don't know why. It looks like it might just be a misspelling because in the Tibetan script, you can see that these two characters look very similar. But there may be something more going on there. I just don't know. But Ninga appears to be the one that's used more frequently. And this means ultimate goal. Ultimate goal. So what is the ultimate goal for someone who is in the detailist philosophical school? Does anybody know the ultimate goal? Yes, thank you. It's nirvana. So the book contains, for the Abhidharma Kosha, the treasure house of higher knowledge, it's giving information that you need in order to practice and reach the highest goal, the ultimate goal, which is nirvana. So we've got the subject matter of stained and unstained things, the purpose, which is to plant seeds for wisdom, and the ultimate goal, which is to give us what we need to reach nirvana. The fourth part of a Buddhist book is Djelpa, which means relationship, which means there has to be a relationship between the previous three. So there must be a relationship between the subject matter, the purpose, and the ultimate goal. And the relationship here is sequential and substantive. So to reach nirvana, we must have wisdom. To develop wisdom, we must understand everything in the universe. What's stained, what's unstained. So the Abhidharmakosha does have those four qualities. So we can rest assured in that we are spending our time wisely in studying this book. So are there any questions on what we've covered so far? So that was I'll give some time. Okay, so that was the end of class 1. So you should now be able to, after you've done the reading, be able to do your homework. So now we'll go on to class 2. And as we talked about last time, we're now going to start diving into karma. We're going to talk about the nature of karma and what it produces. Sorry, I thought I had opened the Tibetan for this class, but I hadn't yet. Sorry. Okay. Okay, great. Lele Jikten Natso Ke. Lele Jikten Natso Ke. Say Lele Jikten Natso Natso Ke. This is the first line, the opening line of the 4th chapter of the Abhidharma. It's a very important line. Lay has 2 different meanings, and it's used here. You see it's repeated, lay. It's used in both of its meanings here. Thanks for the balloons. Persis is so expressive that she's giving off balloons. So the first lay is karma. Or, since that is a Sanskrit word, let's translate it into English to be deeds or actions. The second lay means from. Jikten, we just talked about, which means, does anyone remember? The world, the suffering world. Thank you, Jessica. Jik means to be destroyed, and ten means a basis. So the world, which is our world and the inhabitants in the world, our world, us and everything around us, is perishable. It's suffering. Jikten can also mean planet. And the 3rd chapter of the Abhidharma, as we just discussed, talks about things like planets and how they come into being and how they go out of being. So basically, okay, well, let's just continue on with the words. So not sulk, not sulk. That means various or multitude, many, many different kinds. Not sulk. And ke means come, to come. So this first line says the multitude of worlds come from karma. The multitude of worlds come from karma. So this is an example of samjarwa, which means like basically building a connection between what came previously and what comes after. Master Vasubandhu just finished talking about the suffering world and all the different kinds of suffering, different kinds of stained things. And now he's explaining, where does that come from? Deeds cause the multitude of worlds. So by saying this, he's doing two things. The first thing he's doing is that he is if you get into his biography, you'll see he is talking to people who have who are not Buddhists, who held some wrong ideas about where things come from, where the world comes from. So by saying deeds cause the multitude of worlds, he is dispelling or countering what it is that mutekpa, the mutekpas, it just means people who aren't Buddhist, what they think. And there are three ideas that were held. And so as you hear these three ideas, you can think about whether or not they just come from ancient history or whether they might still exist on this planet. By my giggle, you can probably tell they still exist around here. Okay, the first one of the three wrong ideas is Gyu Takpa. Say Gyu Takpa. Gyu means cause. Takpa means unchanging. So those of us who have studied Buddhism, if you have, you should immediately be going, what? An unchanging cause? Isn't that impossible? But we'll talk about it. The second kind of wrong idea is soul. Say soul. And soul means main or principle. So this soul is a primal energy. And we'll talk about it. The third one is Wang Chuk. Say Wang Chuk. And this is the Tibetan word for Ishvara. You could also think of it as Indra. So this is a god in a Hindu tradition, a creator god. So these are three ideas about where the world comes from. An unchanging cause, a primal energy, or a creator God. So an unchanging cause, it's kind of a weird thing, but it's like it doesn't change. It stays constant, but it creates everything. Somehow it doesn't change when it creates things. So we have debates with people who hold that idea, but we'll get into that as well. Soul, this primal energy. Oh, and just to mention Ben Kramer's book that he worked on translating, called The Great Ideas of the East. It has some discussion of these ideas in it. So from that book, Chuni Lama is the author of that book, and he says that primal energy or fundamental nature is a creator in the sense of causing things. It is not a result in the sense of having been made itself. It is a single, partless thing, and it pervades all causes and results. Kind of wild. So this is held by one of the Sankhya schools in ancient India. And then Wangchuk, those of us who are around now are, I think, very familiar with it. Not all cultures are as steeped in it as others, but that there is a being, a God who created the universe. It's kind of similar to the soul, to the primal energy, in that the God is not created, but the God does create others, every other thing. So the soul, the primal energy, is like a constant in the universe, a constant energy in the universe, and the Wangchuk is the personification of something that sounds very similar to me. A being who creates everything else. the the first two, the Utpala, the the cause that's unchanging, and the primal energy, those are considered both unchanging. And the Wangchuk, or the creator being, is a changing entity, a changing thing. So those were the three ideas prevalent around the time of Master Vasubandhu. The three ideas for explaining how it is the world is created. And there are two basic arguments against these three. The first is an argument against Wangchuk, against a creator God. So Master Vasubandhu concentrates on this argument that a being could have made the world in one shot. I mean, why did he create a world that has time, great expanses of time, as the Abhidharma talks about, but even as we know about, like from the 1st century to the 21st, why all that time? Why did we have to go through the agricultural stage of humans, and then going through the industrial stage? Why did we have to go through all that? Why did we have to use an abacus, that device that they used in the ancient times, of strings of wire with beads on them, where you could do complicated mathematical calculations? Why did we have to have that before we just had a computer where we could or a calculator where we could type in the number, or even a computer where now we just say, hey, Siri, tell me, what's the square root of 3,429,000? Why? A creator being could have just done it, and then it would be done. Which would also raise the question, why do it? It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Then there's the argument against an unchanging cause. So this is the argument against the unchanging cause itself, and against soul, the primal energy. So when something creates something else, it has to move to do that. There has to be a movement between a movement between what I'm going to do is create some moisture in my mouth by taking a sip of water. And so for me to do that, I have to reach over and take my glass, put it to my lips, and sip. Now I've created moisture in my mouth. I had to move to do that. Creation cannot happen without movement. I see some raised hands. and I don't understand. Is there something I can do? Are we all okay? The hands went away. Okay. So, and then in order for things to change, there has to be movement. Um, in order for things to be created, there has to be movement. Um, things that are created have a beginning, a duration, and an ending. Um, things wear out or get destroyed or end. Um, things that move are not permanent in the sense that they never change. So those are the two main arguments. And why should we care about what was going on back in the year 350 current era? Because these ideas are still exist in our world today. And in fact, many of us were raised in a culture that holds one or more of these ideas as being where it is our world came from. And so we have a dripa. This word is very closely related to obstacle, but it's spelled differently. And it means a shadow. It's a mental shadow. Because we were exposed to these ideas in our culture, even or in our home with our family, our thinking, our our thinking is soaked in those ideas, and we may not even be aware that we hold those ideas, but they color, they affect the way we see the world. We should examine the extent to which we have this kind of dripa, we have this kind of shadow in our mind. We have to come to a very strong intellectual understanding that we create our world through our actions, and we have to overcome anything that's like affecting that thought that we in our actions can create our world. It's for some cultures, this is more accepted, and so the shadow is not so strong. In other cultures, this is an absurd idea to say that we create our world through our deeds, and so the shadow is much stronger. Even though we may not hold it ourselves, it's affecting us in a subtle way, and we should recognize that and work against that, work to fight or clear away that shadow. So it's important that we realize this is not just, Master Vasubandhu is not just writing an interesting philosophical text, right? He is writing for the purpose of giving us wisdom, for the purpose of giving us wisdom so we can reach the ultimate goal, which is nirvana, which is freedom from suffering. So that's the first use of the first line, is to dispel these wrong ideas. And there were three of them, right? An unchanging cause, a primal energy, and a creator being. Now, what's the second thing he's doing with this line? It's very obvious. So obvious, it's like, why do we even say it? But we do, which is, it says where the world does come from. It comes from deeds. It comes from actions. So here is the second line. Deni sempa tang de che. Say Deni, sempa, tang, de che. So Deni means that. Referring back to the first line, which is deeds or karma. That. Sempa, in previous classes, I think we've talked about sem, which is mind, right? Sempa is different from mind. Sempa means movement of the mind. It's what the mind does. So it's not mind itself. It's movement of the mind. Semyula chokpa. This is the Tibetan phrase for it's chokpa. It's turning la to yul, object. So the mind is turning to an object. That is movement of the mind. And our minds are constantly doing this. Constantly. We are turning to we are holding objects and we're turning to objects. Unless we're in a state of single pointed concentration on one object, right? We are moving from object to object constantly. The function where did I do that? Geshe. This means created by. So that deeds, deeds or karma is movement of the mind and what it creates. Tong is and. Movement of the mind and what it brings is the way Geshe Michael translated that. Karma is movement of the mind and what it brings. The next line gets more into, okay, what is this, what it brings? What does that mean? Sorry, my camera is in the way. Dès que le temps qu'il est, c'est dès que le temps qu'il est. So day, this means by that movement of the mind. Que, to produce or create. Le dang ngak. Le is body and ngak is speech. Le dang ngak. Body and speech. Kile is of karma. So movement, that or movement of the mind, causes karma of body and speech. So what is it that movement of the mind brings? It brings deeds of body, our physical actions, and speech, our words. So these 4 lines wrap it up all quite nicely. All the multitude of worlds come from deeds. What's a deed? A deed is movement of the mind and what that creates. What is movement of the mind? That is mental karma. What is it that movement of the mind brings? Karma of body and speech. So he set up the whole, he's laid it all out quite nicely for us. Whenever our mind moves, we're committing mental karma. These movements inspire our speech and our physical actions. Anything from, wiping a tear from our eye comes from mental movement, to stealing something from somebody else, to being upset at someone in traffic, to hugging our child with love. Every action we do is born from movement of the mind, from mental karma. And so these are the 3 doorways: body, speech, and mind. So we have the deeds of mind that are driving the deeds of body and speech. These are the only 3 ways we have of expressing ourselves. So now, deeds. We can talk about deeds and divide them into 2 in a most basic kind of way. The most basic kind of deeds are tsempele and sampele. Sempele is mental karma, and Sampele is it's kind of strange to translate it. If we translate this one as uh, like mental karma, then we have to translate this one as sort of like mentated karma. So a mentation, I don't know if you know this word. A mentation is a thought or an emotion. It's something that the mind does. Like a result of movement of the mind is a thought. The way Geshe Michael translates this now is that sempele, mental karma, is motivating karma. Because we just talked about how movement of the mind causes other kinds of karmas, right? Of body and speech. So in a way, it is a motivating karma. It motivates other karmas. Some is motivated karma, deeds that have motivated by mind. So basically, dividing them into two, into motivating and motivated, it's just another way of saying what we just said before, which is there's movement of the mind, and then there's the deeds of body and speech. Okay? Now, this motivated karma also has two types. And this is a distinctly Abhidharma idea. The first type of motivated karma, of deeds of body and speech, is called namparikche. Namparikche. And then the second type is called namparikche mayimpa. Mayimpa is a phrase that means, is not. Is not. So we're dividing the two kinds of motivated karma, deeds of body and speech, into two. One of them is a positive thing, and one of them is the negative of that. Okay? Namparikche, literally it means causes knowing, which is a very awkward phrase in English. Geshe Michael has translated this as communicating, as an adjective. So it is a deed of body or speech that communicates. And then the other type are deeds of body and speech that do not communicate. Okay, so what the heck is communicate? What is being communicated? So namparikche, or communicating karma of body or speech, best to use like an example. So if you, for example, go into a temple and you see people who are in, they're down on one knee and the other knee is up a little bit, and they have their hands together like this. And they're positioned this way in front of a person who's could be standing, could be sitting, but this other person is interacting with them. And let's say they snap their finger. So this this deed, this physical deed that's happening, that someone else perceives, is communicating that someone's taking a vow. Because that's the pose that people take when they take a vow. That snapping of the finger is the physical action that transmits the vow. So it's a communicating act of body and speech. Another example is observing someone who's doing this. And that's prostration. So they are well, to go into prostration, I'm going to lose all my time. So we won't get into the details of what's going on when you do a prostration, but let's just say it communicates prostration. And it's the communicating deeds, the namparvikjes, it's like through the shape of the thing or through the words of the speech. It's communicating the intention or the motivation of the person who's doing the action of body or speech. So non-communicating, basically non-communicating is in the example of taking vows, that non-communicating form of a deed or action is one that does not reveal a motivation. It does not communicate, but it exists from the moment after the snap, the moment after the person gets up. They have, the Abhidharma says, they have this sort of this cloak, this physical coating that's not visible. And only Abhidharma thinks this, and that's okay. It can be a useful thing to think about. So there are 5 features of this non-communicating or invisible, visible thing. This invisible cloak that you wear, for example, after taking a vow. Let me find it here. The first one is that it's yin. It's this cloak, this non-communicating form. Excuse me. Is present even when you're not thinking about it. So if you take vows, you're probably thinking about them pretty much that day. And then the next day, you may remember in the morning, but then you may be walking down the street and, I don't know, a cat crosses your path and you get distracted and you think about the cat and you're no longer like have forefront in your mind that you have this vow. So, but this non-communicating form, this invisible cloak, is still present, even when you're distracted. Samepa, literally this means without mind, but of course that's impossible. Um, the mind doesn't stop. You will never be without a mind, but it's present when you are in what they call a deep, deep state of meditation, where the movement of the mind has become so subtle that for all intents and purposes, you can say it has stopped. So even when you're in that state, let's say seeing the nature of reality directly in meditation, that cloak is still present. The third is Gedong Mike. Gedong Mike. And that means it is either virtuous or non-virtuous. No third option, no neutrals. You don't get a cloak for doing or saying neutral things. You only get a cloak for doing virtue or non-virtue. Then the fourth quality is that it continues in a stream. General. Means continues after. So from the moment after the vow takes hold and continuing on in a stream after that, there is this cloak of a non-communicating form that continues on until the vow is damaged, or the vow is returned, or if you're keeping your vows well, when you die. In this school, they don't have the bodhisattva vows, which you take for not just this life, but future lives as well. They take vows for individual freedom for this life, and they last until you leave this life. And then the fifth characteristic of this kind of non-communicating form of deeds is that it's Zhongwa Che Nam Kyur Chepa. It's caused by the Zhongwa Che, by the great elements. So that's interesting. What are the great elements? The great elements are the four of Sa, Che, Mei, and Lung. Earth, water, fire, and wind. And in the Abhidharma system, and this is talked about in more detail earlier, everything in the universe has some combination of these four elements. So something is more or less solid depending on how much earth it has, or something is warmer or cooler depending on how much fire it has. Something is brittle or malleable, movable, moldable, depending on how much water it has. So everything in the universe, from things like us to things like this, to things like an atom, each of them has some combination of these four great elements. So those are the five qualities of non-communicating form of deeds of body and speech. 1 minute over. I'm so very sorry to have gone over, but at least you can do your homework. So please, if you can, please stay and close up by doing prayers. And if you have to go, that's perfectly fine. You can leave now and we'll see you next time. But if you're staying, let's dedicate our deeds of listening, of teaching, of contemplating, of hearing these teachings towards reaching the ultimate goal, whatever your ultimate goal is. Gewadi gewoku Sunam Yeshe Toksochi Sunam Yeshe Lejunwe Dampar Kunyi Topar Sho. Great, thank you for your attention. Thank you, live translators, for your magical works. Thank you, tech team.